Hey, I'm Naya. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something different. We're going to look at all of the decks I feel like will be the best decks for the upcoming format, but there is a quick disclaimer. We're not going to be taking into account Burst of Destiny just yet. We're going to be only talking about what Burst of Destiny will do to those decks that I wish to talk about, which are the previous format decks that will still be good since the ban list didn't really change almost anything. So we're not going to be looking at archetypes from Burst of Destiny, only just different support cards. You'll see. I came up with a bunch of sample deck lists. Now I thought about them. Some of them have been obviously tested out because the decks themselves didn't change much. I went into different discussions with people, and I feel like I have some information to provide for you with those deck lists, but it's better if I just show you. Okay, so the first deck we're gonna talk about is Brigade. Now, this is what I was talking about. I came up with the deck lists. I made what seemed to me like the best version of the deck possible. And then in the side deck slot, I just put different cards we needed to talk about, different types of, versions of the deck, I should say. And we're going to discuss all of it. And I did that for all of the decks that I wish to talk about. So just to make this video a bit more interesting. Now getting into it, we're going to start with Brigade because it was the most dominant deck of the previous format. So let's go. Now first of all, Brigade didn't lose that much. It just lost 2 Tinky and it lost a Barrage. So we need to put something in here to just, make up for the lost spots. So basically, the first thing that is important to note regarding the Tinky and the Barrage loss is I feel like we should still play Zodiacs. Now, I felt like the Zodiac version was the best one all along. No shade to the people playing the Rescue Cat version or the Lyrilusk Barrier Statue Turbo or like the combination or whatever. It works and it's fine. That's why I put it here because this is still an option, but I always felt like the Zoo version was just superior. That's why I built this sample deck list as with Zeus. I included Zeus for the purpose of not necessarily the Chalkanine Fergite entire combo on the first turn because you would need to open Rat or Turboblade with a discard, which, let's be honest, is not, it's not gonna happen that many times because it's not searchable anymore with only 1 Dinky. But I decided for this version still because you need to have a way of going second with Zeus. So it's not about the going first, building the board, but it's simply for going second. So this is all about the Zeus. And now just talking briefly about the other cards. Like I mentioned, the Rescue Cat version, it's fine, but I feel like if you get Veilered or Impermed on your normal summon, you're gonna pass 99% of the time. So I just don't feel like it's worth it. And Barrier Statue is incredible, especially since Drytron didn't get hit. Many people are still gonna play them. For example, Prank Kit players struggle against Statue and just a lot of other decks. Now granted, Virtual World will probably gain on popularity, so Statue is not that big of an issue, but still, you need to waste your battle phase to beat over it, so there's that in any given deck. But these are the 2 versions, and now let's discuss Torrential. So Torrential, I did not put Strike in here. Maybe I should have just put it here in the side slot, but some people play Solemn Strike, which is completely fine and it's impactful, but I feel like Torrential is just impactful to the point where it's worth running over Strike. Now, granted, yes, people can make it miss timing. With Prankis, this is easy. With Virtual World, you can do this. Also with Drytron. So it may seem not that great at first glance, but when you think about it, if you're good enough, if you're smart enough, if you're skilled enough, or if you just try hard enough and just learn when to Torrential people, you will get the upper hand. Because if you do this at the exact moment where you're supposed to, Torrential is gonna win you the game. 100%. So that's why I decided to put Torrential in here instead of Strike. I'm satisfied with this. Obviously, this has not been tested by me yet, but I've seen success of people with this exact, option instead of Strike. So that's something to note. Then moving on to Designator. I put it in here. I had 3 more slots left and I figured, why not Designator, since you already run Hand Trap, since your deck is basically like a very small engine deck, like a 1-card engine deck, engine combo, I guess. So you can play hand traps, you can play traps. And since this deck is very flexible and you have so many different cards, why not just put Crossout in here, and you can even negate someone's desires. Like, I know this is like far stretched, but you can do it. And then also something to mention is Fusion Destiny with Phoenix Enforcer. I've seen OCG lists run this. It makes sense to me. That's why I just put it here for you to, I guess, make a mental or written note that this is something that can be run after Burst of Destiny drops. And this random Cyclone here is just because this deck overall can run, like I said, hand traps and traps, and also utility cards such as Cosmic Cyclone. For example, if your meta is very, I guess, control stun decks or something like that, you can main Cyclone, because why not? Like I said, your engine is small, you have the space. So this is just here to indicate that you can run any utility card you feel like impact your personal meta the most. Just looking through the extra deck, it's quite standard, nothing really changed here since we kept the Zeus. Also, yeah, you can run Lyrilusk, like I said. It's very personal preference. But I think that's all that was needed to say about Tri-Brigade. So moving on. Alright, so the next deck, we were bound to talk about Prank Kids at some point, so let's just do it now. The first thing I want to point out, I put 2 Crossout in here when I was brainstorming the deck. I feel like this should be a 3, but I guess this shouldn't be the thing we begin with, since we need to talk about how the ban list actually impacted Prank Kids. We lost 2 Meow Meow, which I feel like is a lot. Now, Doodle would have hurt. Since it didn't happen, we don't need to waste time talking about that. The hit that happened was Meow Meow. Now, there are 2 things I want to point out before we begin with any of the theory behind it. So, I feel like it's not about the grind game, and it's not about like your follow-up. We lost Meow Meow and this hurts, but it is because I think sometimes 1 Raigeki is not enough. Now hear me out. I decided to let's just look at the sample deck list. Let's do it like that, it's gonna make more sense. So, I don't have 2 Poly anymore, I bumped it to 3, and I also put Thunder Dragon Fusion in here. We have 3 Pandemonium. So the entire idea is that you would utilize polymerization as much as you can to establish Toad on your first turn, because sometimes 1 Raigeki will not be enough. But if you want to keep the Meow in rotation, if you want to shuffle it back with pranks, you're gonna have to have something that sort of backs you up, if you know what I mean. So you have hand traps, you have the Toad, and that's why I think the Meow hit actually hurt, because sometimes, like I said, 1 Raigeki is not enough. For example, at the regionals, I played against an IDS guy. Yeah, I guess it was more like a heavy Shaddoll version, and I wanted to pop his field. He chained out Shaddoll Fusion, I just chained Butler again. And it was so free, I didn't need to sweat, I didn't need to think about it, I just did it. And since we won't have that option anymore, most of the time, you're gonna just have to choose if you want to have follow-up or if you want to have 2 Raigekis. And I feel like Prank Kids weren't really hindered by the ban list. It didn't affect the consistency, it didn't affect what the deck could do, it didn't affect the body spam that it provides. It just made it so you're gonna have to be much more skilled, and it took skill, like, even now to play this deck, I feel like, because it's just hard to play. And now it's gonna be even harder because you're gonna need to make a choice. If you want to pop twice, if you're comfortable enough with how your turn 3, I guess the entire turn 3 of the game is going to look like, because if you decide to banish Meow and you know you won't have it anymore, then you need to seal the game up. And if you're comfortable enough with that, if you maybe, for example, what I do is I like to summon 2 waters after going to Butler, so if they don't kill them, if they're maybe not aware, or if they cannot do it because of the pops, then I would go into Toad immediately on my 3rd turn and just OTK or attempt to OTK. So if you know you're gonna seal up the game, the Meow hit didn't really hurt that much, but this is something I need to point out. I'm very aware from all of the playing, all of the testing, that sometimes you need to have the Meows because you're just gonna have your board completely broken, or you're gonna be hand trapped, things happen. I know things happen. And this is something we're gonna have to be dealing with, and I decided to put in as much extenders as I could. Cards like Instant Fusion and Reborn and 1-for-1 and another Poly and also the Thunder Dragon Fusion. is what I feel like are the follow-ups that will not really replace the meow, but make it a bit easier. So if you, for example, get Nibiru, this is something we should also discuss. That's why I put Link Spider in here to go into Anaconda to use Thunder Dragon Fusion. But basically, one thing I was thinking of, and I wasn't quite, I didn't decide yet, but I think we should maybe bump Link Spider to 2, just because when you get Nibiru, you're gonna have the token, but then your follow-up will most likely be only Pranks, and Pranks makes a token which cannot go into Anaconda. So if you feel like you have enough space, maybe just throw another Link Spider in here. I don't know, I guess I feel kind of weird about that, but the entire theory behind this version is to just go into Toad as soon as you can and to play as many hand traps just to have more disruption for your opponent. And this is also one of the reasons why I didn't put Parallel in here, is because you could play obviously Cross Out at 3 and you have much more extenders, so you're not that tied to having to chain block your Prank Kid so you don't get ashed. And also Parallel is incredible, but Dweller is not really applicable for every single meta, I feel like. For most of them it is, but yeah, I feel like this version is just better for now without Parallel. I will try to test it like this first and then maybe with him, but I think this is the route we should be taking, just as much extenders as we can have, because also Thunder Dragon Fusion provides you a search for fancies, which is very strong since you run a lot of names. And if it really gets tough, maybe we just throw a terraforming in there to make sure we have enough names where on the 3rd turn we don't need to use Meow, but just use Pandemonium, for example, right away to go into the fusions and start body spamming even more, because this is something I said before, I'm just going to repeat myself really quick. It didn't hinder Prank Kids in their consistency and their ability to, for example, just end on like a Toad and Washer. Sometimes this is enough. So yes, the hit was impactful, but I think if we play, no pun intended, play our cards correctly, I think Prank Kids can still be an amazing deck even after the ban list is official. Okay, the next deck is going to be Drytron. Now I feel like we won't be talking about Drytron as much since the ban list, let's be honest, didn't affect it at all. We needed to cut one Eva, so we can just put basically what Konami did with this ban list. We were sort of, I feel like, the Drytron players were sort of struggling with going over 40 cards because of the bricks if you play the Dragoon version. So by cutting one Eva, it just makes it easier for us to go down to 40. So there's something to note, not really that important. But what I did in my sample deck list is I put in Cross Out, just because Drytron doesn't really play hand traps. It can play going second cards, or for example like Talons or Droplets or Chalice or Ruler, something to deal with the board, since the engine is kind of big if you want to play like this, because I feel like this is the correct version. Obviously, play whatever you want. I just think that decks like this, and for example also Virtual World where you have a bunch of names, this is something that gets you going. Not hand traps, but the ability to just push through boards with your engine. So that's why I put in Cross Out, to just put in one-offs of different things that might hinder you but are still impactful enough if you draw them in the current meta. So if Drytron gets a bit more popular, now this is going to do two things. It's going to be good that you're going to be able to main deck Droll, for example, and have it work with your Cross Out, since you'll be able to draw your opponents, but if you're the Drytron player, obviously the other person is also going to be able to draw you. You're going to have Cross Out to deal with it though, so I think it's a smart decision to play it, but it's obviously going to have to be tested out. The cards I put in to work in synergy with it is Valor, Ash, Nibiru, and Imperm, also Bell. And I just cut the Orange Light to 2. I felt like this did its job. And then the Dragoon engine. Now, not everybody runs it, obviously, if people don't play Dragoon or if they just choose not to. So there are different options. Now, what I'm talking about, if you check a couple videos back on my channel, there's a combo of how you can establish with Auroradon Imperial Order. Now, it's sadly still legal. it is what it is. So this is an option if you wish to cut something from the extra deck, because overall the extra deck, there are a couple slots that are like mandatory, I guess, but you could cut, for example, Appaloosa, IP, or Unicorn, also Anaconda and Dragoon if you don't play that engine, for Litterlusk, for Fucho, for Underworld Goddess. There are different cards you can obviously run in this deck. Then this is an additional Herald, just to remind you that this is something you can also run. During testing, sometimes it happened to me that I felt the need for an additional Herald, just because with Eva you would search Diviner and then you would have nothing to send on your following turn if you needed to dig for an additional ritual. But right now I don't run Natasha in this build because I feel like she's not as impactful. She can be, this is quite appropriate that she's here, because she can be run in side deck just for the instances when you go close to time, because this is a thing. We need to be dealing with the time rules. But also she just provides OTKs. Like, she goes into Borosword so easily, you wouldn't even believe it. So if you choose to main deck her, this is also an option and it's quite good. Other than that, I feel like Dratron is just basic Dratron from before, so not really much to say about it. Alright, moving on to Dragon Link. Now, I have a lot to say about Dragon Link. I hope I won't ramble for too long, because it is a lot to say about it. So let's just cut to the chase. Let's just get right into it. First thing, it wasn't hit on the ban list. So what we're talking about right now is essentially just different Dragon Link builds that we could have talked about like a month ago or in 2 months' time, since it's probably not gonna get hit again, as of right now. The second thing to note, in the Dragon Link deck, I feel like your deck building and the ratios are incredibly important, because you need to have everything calculated so it doesn't happen that you draw a random hand of like Absolouter, Noctovision, Levianir, and like a Red MD. I know this sounds horrible, and maybe like a driver. I'm sorry, but it happens. So that's why you need to have your normal summons, your starters, your extenders, everything calculated. And I feel like I haven't really gone through that yet for this particular build. I have not calculated it, but I've seen lists almost identical. I've played Dragon Link a lot, and it just feels like something that could be worked with. Now, everybody can do it to their personal preference. I've seen Absolouter being run at 2, which feels a bit risky to me. Also Noctovision at 3, it's an incredible extender, but sometimes it's just way too random in a hand where it doesn't do anything. Then Black Metal Dragon is also a point of discussion. I'm a fan of it, I've always been, but some people don't really like it, so if you choose to cut it, it's completely fair. Gamma, I feel like is quite standard just because of Chaos Ruler and Savage. It's not just, negate the Ash that falls on Chaos Space. It's like, it does much more. Also, the ratio of Tracer and Cyphered is important. I think that in the previous formats where you had World Legacy God Dragon, for example, you could run Tracer at 2, or maybe even Cyphered ratios changed a bit. But right now, I feel like 3 and 3 or 3 and 2 is the correct version. Then moving on to Rocket Synchron, I think he should be run in 2 just because of Archfiend and the ability to, for example, just go into, with Absolouter, you could go into Ruler or Savage if you wish. Also with Noctovision, it's quite similar. So I think he gained much more value over time, especially now after Alpi got hit. Then talking about Chamber Dragon Maid. I have it here just to point out that the ratios of Chamber and Tidying could be also changed. She could be run in 2, for example, just because the Tidying bounce is incredible. I've also seen people run 3 Tidying, which feels just a bit excessive to me. I like the 1-2 ratio, maybe because I only have 1 Chamber, so, I can only play this ratio. But for real, if I decided to run 2 Chamber, I would probably just get it because she is really, really good. So consider that also. If you want, it's gonna get reprinted anyway. So if you're into Dragon Link, just get the cheaper Chamber and you're gonna be fine. This doesn't matter right now. Let's talk about the build. Red Eyes, I think he's important still, especially if you get Nibiru and you summon him off of Seals. Revive something, make a negate, or just make another Seals or something like that if you're not locked. Then let's see if there's something else that needed to be discussed. As for the extra deck, it got much more space. You could run Underworld Goddess, you could run Triple Burst because of the arrow that's pointing down, maybe bump Quad Boro to more since he is very good and very underrated. Seals obviously at 2 copies, Access Code, also Appaloosa can be run if that's something you wish, IP for just random scenarios where you get, for example, Nibiru or something like that, and you could just make Unicorn for game because sometimes a spin is enough. And then talking about the other cards. As for Crossout, I did not put it in the sample deck list in the main deck simply for the reason, number 1, it wasn't tested yet, and number 2, Dragon Link can play through so many things, it's insane. Like you legit have to have such a garbage hand that you can play through like a hand trap or 2, because Dragon Link, what essentially is just extenders. It's just a pile of extenders that work together and build like an unbreakable board. So I don't think you would need to run Crossout. You could just run this basic build because your extenders are like Crossout. They make it so you play through hand traps without having to use a card that's not exactly engine. So I'm not a fan of the idea of running Crossout in here, but I guess only time will tell. Then as for Fusion Destiny, it can also be run, doesn't conflict with anything, just use it at the end, then I guess it should be good. Make him, because why not? And as for Floodgates, they're not in the main deck here because that's very your personal meta dependent, but Gozen and Rivalry are incredible. You can play around Gozen, you just need to, you need to tailor your plays like that, and Rivalry obviously doesn't care. So there is that, and I think that's all we should say about Dragon Link just right now, since it wasn't hit on the ban list and we're just discussing basic builds at this point. Alright, we're getting into Virtual World. Let's just get right into it. It's a lot to talk about. As you can see, I have my whole side deck filled with things. So, the extra deck. It's very versatile, you can play whatever you want. That's why I decided to throw every single thing I could think of in here, just for you to have the option. So let's go. Blackwing is here to burn the opponent in time. Scarlet Dragon Archfiend, same purpose. Ultimaya package is being run quite frequently. I think it's the correct version. It's just my opinion, but I think Crystal Wing is strong, not necessarily by itself. So for example, if I played Virtual World, I wouldn't always tailor and point my plays to having just the Ultimaya Crystal Wing board. Sometimes just a random Chucha is enough. But it's still good that it's in the extra deck because it provides utility that you might need. Also having the power to beat over things if you decide to negate something and beat over something that you wouldn't have been able to out otherwise. So moving on, Beatrice is a point of discussion also here. I'm not that big of a fan of the idea of Beatrice. I have not tested it though, so I cannot speak from experience, but I think the point where she should be run is after Phoenix Enforcer drops. That's wwhy we have Fusion Destiny here together with him, and also Malicious that represents one of the targets for Fusion Destiny. The other one can be, for example, Denier, because he's level 3. He's also dropping in Burst of Destiny. This should be, I feel like this deck is the perfect one to run this engine. I've talked about this engine quite a lot in this video, but I think for this deck is specifically tailored just because Malicious supports all of your rank 6 plays, all of your synchros with the level 3s in your deck. It just feels perfect. So there's that. Then also, this is quite standard. Here is the Kaliga Muddy Mud Dragon version package. In theory, I was a big fan, and then I played like a couple games with it, and the Kaliga would get impermed or something, and it just felt horrible. It felt like my board established exactly nothing. So I don't think it's that good of an idea to play it, but it's for your meta, as something that you want, obviously do it. Then there's the Crystron, I can't pronounce his name, guy. And he is just a way of dealing with, since the entire Virtual World deck is a way of dealing with things in different types of ways, he banishes. So he just does this. Some of them, like, banish, some of them send, some of them destroy. He banishes, so this is an option if you want. Also, Fortune Tune is mostly run. Like, if people don't run Gossip Shadow or Break Sword, they usually run Fortune Tune because it's just free Zeus. And most people would run rank 6s anyway. So if you need to run a rank 3, maybe just play Fortune Tune if you want to be safe. However, if you decide to run Terror Top together with Taketomborg, then I feel like you should be running Gossip Shadow just for the sole purpose of being Nibiru proof. So if this is an engine that you're down with, if this is something that you want to play, I would consider also putting these two in the extra deck with it. As for Phantom Fortress, this card is incredible. The effect is amazing. You choose whatever you want to do, and most of the effects are impactful. So whatever way you decide to disrupt your opponent, it's gonna do something. There are two more things that needed to be pointed out. One of them is, let's just continue, I guess, since we're in the side deck portion anyway. Psy Reflector together with Cupid Pitch. Cupid Pitch is dropping in Burst of Destiny. Just to be brief, you could make Hulky Fibrax before you were locked into only summoning level or rank 3 or higher with the virtual world effects. And essentially what Cupid Pitch is, it's a search for either Lulu or Lily, since they both have 600 defense. You can just go ahead and read the effect of Cupid Pitch and figure the rest out for yourself. But this is an option. It seems a bit too excessive for me. I don't like it when just random engines that do not that much are being squeezed into decks, but this is completely my personal preference. I just put it here so you know everything there is to know about the deck. And then the last thing, Crossout Designator. I feel like you could just play, for example, a one of Nibiru, Ash and Valor, and I put here a Lancia, which if the meta shifts in a way where you could be main decking Lancia, for example for Brigade or something like that, you could just throw one in here and have it together with Crossout to negate the opponent's Lancia, since it really does hinder you. So, oh yeah, and also 2 Italy, because why not? I'm super excited that Italy got to 2. I think you should bump it to 2 if you're running Virtual World. So there's that. I hope it wasn't too quick going over all of it. Obviously, please go ahead and read all of the effects from the extra deck monsters. If you're a Virtual World player, test everything out and then build your extra deck and obviously main deck accordingly. Alright, the last deck we're going to be talking about is IDS. I'm not personally a big fan, but I know the gist of it. I know what it's about. I'm just not that big of a fan, but this doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it objectively. This build that I came up with is, first of all, it was with the help of 2 of my friends that play IDS. They have a lot of knowledge about it. They have taught me a lot about it, and they said that they approved, basically. They approved this build that I could showcase it to you guys and talk about all of the other options. So let's just go. First of all, this is a quite heavy Shadow version. I think this is the superior one just for the purpose of going into Winda, obviously. Also, Super Poly and Shadow Fusion are incredibly strong cards, and usually they just, caught the opponent off guard most of the time when I've seen them being played. So there's that. Also, Cyclone is something like a utility card that just can be used. A couple hand traps only because this deck doesn't really run them since it's a Shadow heavy version. That's why also Rush Shadow is here, because you could just establish essentially a window loop. If she goes from the field, takes the Rush Shadow back, and then you just repeat it once more and the opponent cries. Basically, this is this version. But here in the side deck, we have different options, starting with, you could bump up the count of your Dogmatica monsters to more if this is something you would want. Also, Maximus is here. If you want to check out my friend's build on my channel, he topped with a sort of Maximus oriented build, I should say. So check out his build. That's why Maximus is here, to just point out that you could play him together with Almirage and Secure Gardna. So that's why they are here. And then Lord. Lord is representing 2 things. One of them being, he could be run in the deck just for the purpose of going into Construct because he's a light. Overall, he's just an incredible monster. But also, you could just run Eldritch Invoked. Just Eldritch Dragma Invoked. Because you can replace the Shadow fusions, and the trap card with just different traps. Just use conks, use cursed outlands. It's like just play a heavy version of it, just like you would play a heavy version of Shadows, if that makes sense. My friend is seeing quite a bit of success with that version, so this is why the Lord is here to just let you know, test out the Owlish version, because it's not that bad, honestly. Then for the Phantasmes, he's here because he's representing, first of all, a body. This deck doesn't really tend to OTK, it can, but it's struggling a bit. Maybe the Shadow version is fine, but Schism prevents your summoned monsters from attacking directly, so you don't really have that much ability to push. What Phantasme does is he fixes your hand if you, for example, brick on too many Alistairs. That's why Terraforming is also here, to let you know that I did not forget about it, I just didn't put it in here because I felt like, I know this may sound weird, but sometimes there is a thing as too many Alistairs. So I didn't put Terraforming in here, but I put Phantasme in the side just as an idea. You could run him to fix your hands, you can run him to prevent your Alistair from being targeted, negate the targeting, and also just to be a body. Then there's these two, El Shadow Fusion. I've seen it be run, I am not quite a big of a fan, I feel like it's too excessive. I think the Shadows and the Trap and the Shadow Fusion are enough, but you can run El Shadow Fusion if you test it, if you feel like it's good, by all means run it. The last thing I wanted to discuss was Super Poly. There are two things I've learned about Super Poly that I feel like I wanted to share with you in case you didn't know. So, since Trap Brigades are quite prevalent, people can run people can end on Appaloosa. And if you go Alistair effect, they chain Appaloosa, you can chain Super Poly, make Raijin, and because Appaloosa can't reduce her attack, she can't negate Alistair successfully. There's one thing. And then the other thing, if you summon Alistair, search Invocation, you can go Super Poly away, using the invocation as cost, and then your Alistair would get banished and you could recycle him back with invocation. So there's another thing to point out. Now, yes, granted, your Alistair effect will probably get negated by something, because it always does, and since I said you're going second, it's probably gonna get negated anyway, but I guess if you hard draw invocation, this is something that's applicable. I don't know, I just felt like it's interesting, I wanted to put it in the video. As for Prosperity, I think it's necessary. You have the space to run two of everything. I don't think two Makaba is necessary because she's not that impactful anymore. And there are also different fusions that are utility. We don't run Purgatrio in this build because it's not... It's interesting because Makaba and Purgatrio were so strong way back when, but right now it's just Raijin probably does more. Magistus is here because the Almirage package should be just run with Maximus, since it takes up a bit too much of the extra deck space. Gravity Controller obviously is very strong, and Anaconda is here for the Shadow Fusion. So yes, I think that was all regarding IDS. It wasn't hit, and you can legit run whichever version you please. And that was it. Let me know down in the comments if you learned anything, and also if you have anything to say, if you have anything to add. I love to read y'all's responses. So yeah, just like the video, as always, and give me a sub, check out Twitch, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.